Hey, it's Jeff, the SB Spaz, and a while back, maybe even a couple years ago, I don't remember exactly how long ago, NF Geeks did a video about true family versus actual family. And the gist of it was that, your actual family, meaning like your blood relatives, but true family being like somebody that's your own temperament or own type. And it was obviously from the perspective of, of NFs on NF Geeks, and obviously NF types are, one of the more rarer types, intuitive types in general. There's less of them, so it was kind of a more of the idea that an NF person, may not see or may not interact with a whole lot of people of their own type, and it may take a while to find somebody, but when they do, there's like this instant connection between the two that helps them in their own like development as a person and self-esteem and all that, because they finally meet somebody they feel like understands them better and they can relate to and all that. But of course he addressed it to everybody, so that whatever type that you are, that other people of your type are like your true family, so to speak. And I think that probably, I don't know how to put this exactly, probably the NF perspective, is like, because NFs tend to do like a lot more like self-analysis and start that at a much earlier age than a lot of other types do, that that might be sort of an instant thing, like the first time they really meet somebody they feel like is like them, there's kind of this instant connection. For other types that are more common, it may not necessarily be the case, because we don't necessarily realize that somebody is the same type as us, because we're not looking for the same type of things. We might think in terms of, well, does this person share the same hobbies as me, or the same background, or are in the same clubs, or go to the same church, or these kind of things are more what connects us to people, I think, in sensor types in general, rather than like, kind of brain wavelength type of stuff, being on the same, of the same mentality. So it takes a lot longer to sort of realize, and so it sounds kind of funny, because the whole idea of the video was like, NFs are that kind of this minority that they feel isolated and alone and all this, and then they find that they're not the only ones, and it's like this kind of euphoria experience. But the thing is, I felt like that too, despite being a much more common type, despite SP types being much more common, because again, we don't tend to think in those same terms. So before I really learned about personality types and temperaments and understood all this stuff, I didn't feel as much connection to people who might have been my same type, because I wasn't thinking about the things that really connected us. But since I've felt a lot more of a connection with people that I probably never would have, because we're very different from each other. And I've talked about this, in some past videos, about people that have very different lifestyles than me, but we share the same type and thus, the same mentality. And I can relate to a lot of what those people say when they talk about like themselves and their approach to life and their philosophies and stuff like that. And that goes for both real people and fictional characters. There's been a lot more fictional characters where I've, if they're written well and consistently, if it's a television show or a movie or whatever it is, then a lot of times I can kind of clue into somebody's type that way, and be like, oh yeah, I can see the similarities, even if before I might not have ever done that, because they might not be, might not have a lot in common with me in terms of superficial stuff. So, I still haven't really in offline met or interacted with another person that's ESFP that I really feel like I've been able to talk to this sort of stuff about, like what we have in common that's not, hobbies and activities and things like that. But online, thankfully, I have, now met a few that I talk to on a pretty regular basis, and that's really cool. And that's kind of the thing, the main thing, why I kind of wanted to, well, all along wanted to respond to the thing about the true family, because it's almost like nothing makes me feel better in terms of talking with somebody than when I find somebody that we're the same, mentality, and we can talk about these things and really like connect about stuff and understand exactly what the other one is talking about. Because it's again, from the perspective of the intuitive types, they might think, well, there's a whole lot of people like you, so this shouldn't be that hard for you. But it really isn't, because there's not that many that are familiar enough with these kind of things, that are self-aware, enough, and know enough about, kind of what makes us tick personality-wise, that they can talk about this kind of stuff with me. So when I find somebody like that, it's a really cool thing. And so I wanted all along to talk about that, and I wanted to specifically talk for a bit about one person that I met, another ESFP that I met online named Jane. And the cool thing about this is it's a real-life example of something that I've said several times in previous videos on my channel, is that I talked about how type sort of transcends these other barriers, you might say, of culture and location and generation gaps and male-female differences and all these kind of things. And Jane is a real-life example of that, because from the moment that we started chatting with each other, we were like instant connection. We spent a lot of time when we chat just saying yeah to the other person, what the other person says, or I know, because we think so much the same that a lot of things, it's like it's almost doesn't have to be spoken, but we're ESFP, so we speak it anyway, or type it, as the case may be. But we've done video chat also, but not haven't recorded yet. We're still hoping maybe we'll get a chance to do that. But ESFPs are notoriously unreliable when it comes to doing that. But the point is that Jane lives on the other side of the world from me. She's much younger than me, and is female, obviously, and different culture, different background, different interests. All kinds of differences that are the things that generally the world looks at as being what people have in common. But we can talk about our feelings and our interactions with other people and all the things about that makes us who we are in terms of our mentality and our way of looking at things and our approach to life, and just all the things that make us happy and make us sad and make us do all these things. And we're right there with each other, over and over again. We say something where the other person is just like, yeah, exactly, you get it, And so that's the really cool thing about talking to Jane. And like I said, there's a few others that I've talked a little bit with like that, but she's probably been the one that we've kind of talked the most in depth and like had those what I would call SP moments, because we Mike talks a lot about on NF Geeks about NF moments, and he did a video with me where we talked about, well, what makes an SP moment, and I talked mainly about something that was me kind of having a moment myself. But when it comes to interactions with other people, I think that's a good example, is just that kind of moment of just being understanding what each other's motivations are and mentality, and just connecting on that level of like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And when I was going to do this video, my intention was to like give you some examples of things that we were on the same wavelength about, but I didn't like write them down or put them up on anything, so I was like, well, I'll just remember some, and then I kind of went blank. But I read back through some of our previous chats because I wanted to kind of refresh my memory about some of the things we had talked about. But I guess one of the things was we talked about how there's this kind of misconception that ESFPs are like naturally like really good at socializing. I mean, obviously I've talked before on other videos about about how that definitely hasn't been the case for me. And I think what is there are some ESFPs who seem to be great at socializing, but even the way they do that is different than, for instance, an ESFJ. Um, the ESFJs, I think, are probably the best at like the social networking type thing, where they connect with, they just form these networks. I mean, that's the best thing to put it. Bonds with like other families or other parents or other husbands or wives, or like they're in all these clubs or meetings or groups together, and they form these things, and it's just very natural for them to do that. For for SPs in general, I think for ESFPs and ESTPs especially, like the way we tend to like socialize is by making an impact on people in some way, so some kind of attention getting thing. So it's not as natural when it comes to the whole socializing aspect of it. Like, I mean, what we do is natural, but I mean, it's not the same. Um, I'm trying to come up with a good way to put that, because I feel like sometimes it comes to me like a good way of explaining the difference, and sometimes it doesn't. And this is one of those times where um, it hasn't. I'm kind of tired, but I wanted to do this video because I actually promised Jane that I would. So I didn't want to let her down, because it's very rare that I make promises, but when I actually do, then I try very hard to keep them. And even when I have technical difficulties, like I've had trying to do stuff on my computer tonight. But anyway, that was the main thing I wanted to say. Was just we talked about some of the struggles that we've had in terms of sort of feeling that it's hard to express ourselves, because when we do, we can get hurt with the reactions from people. And that's kind of, I've talked before about that sort of led to some depression I had when I was a kid and a teenager, and she's kind of told me similar things. And so on both talking about kind of happy, fun stuff and things we like to do just to joke around and to mess with people and stuff like that, and also kind of the more serious or potentially, kind of emotionally sad kind of things, we've been able to talk about those things and just really understand where the other person's coming from, even though our details of our lives are very different. But the connection it transcends that, and that's the really cool thing. And what I wanted to, the main point I wanted to make was that, I agree with Mike in that there's this sort of aspect of the true family, and I think, for SPs, and I guess for ESFPs and specifically, I think, like I've talked about before, SFPs in general seek more people connections than STPs do. It doesn't mean that all STPs don't want to be around people, but they have their own struggles in that area, kind of needing people in some ways, but also, having some hostility towards them in different ways. With SFPs, I think we want to be like everybody's friend at the same time, but at the same time, like, sometimes scare people off, or don't know how to maintain friendships and things like that, and don't even keep the social networks like the SJs do. So there's this sort of paradox of wanting and needing people for our audience and for our for appreciation and for affection, and yet somehow kind of alienating the same people in different ways, and then we're sort of retreating into ourselves if we don't get the reactions that we want. So we can be like, kind of oversensitive drama queen types when we don't get, what we want. And then we don't know how to handle that exactly. So we either do one of two things: either don't stop expressing ourselves as much, which I started doing, which I did, when I was a kid, or we lash out at people and kind of alienate people that way. So it's like, either way, it's not necessarily a good way of dealing with it, but it's difficult to know like what the right way is. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm not wanting to make it end on a down note. So anyway, it's cool to have even one person that I can talk to that really gets me. it's even better to have more. But my conversations with Jane have really been, um, I really feel like, she came at a really good time for me because I feel like we can help each other sometimes, and we pump each other up in the things that we say. And sometimes it could be, she's feeling a little down about something, or I am, and the other person is exactly what we needed in that situation. So that's a cool thing, and I'm grateful for it. Um, so thanks, Jane, and thanks to everybody else for watching this. And if you haven't found your true family yet, then I wish you luck in that, and I hope that you have at least one person, or even many people that you can talk to, that you feel like understand you, and you can be on that same connection to each other, because it's a really cool thing when you can find it, and helps in a lot of ways. So yeah, there's my super profound video about that, and we'll see you next time.